Today's lesson is lesson 14 in module 2. We'll be going back and forth between our notebook and our student book, so if you have both of those items ready, that would be great. In this opening exercise, it's not required for you to write this down. I'm just going to essentially make a connection between what we have done in the past with fractions and fraction models to show you how moving the decimal in a long division decimal problem works, why it works conceptually. So you are free to write this down, but it's not necessary. In this opening exercise, it says divide 1/2 by 1/10. Use a tape diagram to support your answer. So what this essentially saying is 1/2 is 1/10 of something. That's something we don't know. So the first thing I'm going to do is map this out. So this is the part that I don't really know. This is what my answer is going to be. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut it into tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All of this represents that half. And then each one of these tenths is a half. So essentially what we're figuring out is 10 times 1/2 is equal to what? If I put the 10 over a 1 and I multiply straight across, 10 times 1 is 10, 1 times 2 is 2, and this means to divide, so 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 1/2 divided by 1/10 is 5. If I wanted to model this using my invert and multiply rule, I would do 1/2 divided by 1/10. Remember, I keep, change, and flip to my reciprocal. So I keep my 1/2. I change my operation to multiplication, and I flip to my reciprocal, which is 10 over 1. I multiply straight across. 1 times 10 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So again, I get the same answer. Now I'm going to go on to example 1. And example 1 is now going to connect this decimal to the fraction. So if I rewrote this decimal as a fraction, 0.5 is the same as 1/2. And 1/10 is 1/10. So I'm essentially doing the same thing. If I were to make my tape diagram, that's my part I don't know. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Whoops, I made too many. And this time, all of this equals that 0.5, which is half, plus this equals that 0.5. If I wanted to rewrite this 0.5 divided by 1/10, so 5/10 divided by 1/10, I would put 0.5 over 0.1, because if you remember, that symbol means to divide. Now, for me to write this as a whole number, I have to figure out how can I move this decimal? And I always start with my denominator. So if I have 0.5 over 0.1 and I want to move my decimal one place to the right, then I know I have to multiply by 10. 1 0, one place. Whatever I do to my denominator, I do to my numerator. So I'll be moving that one as well. So it becomes 5 over 1, which is the same as 5. So we're going to go on now. They did the first one for you. It says convert the decimal division expressions into fraction division expressions in order to create whole number divisors. You do not need to find quotients. Explain the movement of the decimal point. The first exercise has been completed for you. So in this one, you can see that they wrote 18 6/10 divided by 2 3/10 as a fraction. So my dividend is my numerator and my divisor is my denominator. And because there was one number past the decimal in the denominator, then I always multiply by 10. When I multiply both of those by 10, that decimal in both moves to the right one place, which gives me 186 and 23. And then the explanation that they wrote out is I multiplied both the dividend and divisor by 10 or by 1 power of 10. So each decimal point moved one place to the right because they grew larger by 10. This explanation is going to come in very handy for you when it's time for the assessment. So I would make sure that I read that over, I understand it, and I come to know it well enough that I can use it to explain. So we're going to do, what I want you to do is I want you to try number 2, and I want you to try number 3 on your own. So it's at the top of the next page. So I want you to go ahead and pause the video, try those on your own, and then come back and check it. So for number 2, you should have put 14 4/100 over 4 68/100, multiplied both of those by 100 because there are two numbers behind the decimal in the denominator, which would have given you 1,404 over 468. And your explanation is I multiplied both the dividend and the divisor by 100 or 2 powers of 10. So each decimal moved 2 places to the right because they grew by 100. If you need a second to pause to check all of your work and check all of your statement, then that's fine. If not, let's go on to number 3. Number 3, because there were 3 numbers behind the decimal in your denominator, you should have multiplied both the numerator and denominator by 1,000, which should have given you 162 over 36. And again, your statement, I multiplied both the dividend and the divisor by 1,000 or 3 powers of 10. So each decimal moved 3 places to the right because they grew larger by 1,000. Now we are ready to go on to example number 2 in your student book. And now we are going to actually solve for that quotient. So it says evaluate the expression. First, convert the decimal division expression to a fraction division expression in order to create the whole number divisor. So that's what you just practiced in exercises 1, 2, and 3. So the very first thing I'm going to do is put 25 2/10 over 72/10. Because I have 2 numbers in behind my decimal in my denominator, then I know I'm going to have to move it 2 places. So that's going to be times 100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So I have to move it 1, 2. And notice there's an empty space, so I'm going to fill that with a 0. So now I have 2520 over 72. So this becomes my division problem now. So now I have 2,520 divided by 72. And I'm going to use my strategies that I've used in the previous lessons on dividing using the long division algorithm. So I'm going to put in my T-chart over here to the side. And because my divisor is 72, I'm going to go ahead and fill out my T-chart, writing out all of my multiples of 72 so that I can better handle my long division algorithm with accuracy. I don't have to do any guessing and checking. I can simply use my chart. So the chart takes a few minutes to set up, but once it's set up, you have it to use in future references or anything else, and you can guarantee accuracy in your algorithm. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because I have 2 digits in my divisor, I'm going to look at 2 digits in my dividend, and I can see my first 2 digits are smaller, so that tells me I have to go over to my third place. So I'm going to look for an answer over here that is smaller than 252 or the same as 252. So I can see that 216 is close to 252, but 288 is over 252. So I'm going to go with my 216, and its partner is 3. So then I subtract. I bring down my 0. So now again, I'm going to look over here for 360, and I can see there's an exact match, and its partner is 5. So that becomes the next digit in my quotient. So then this is my answer, and I can simply add it in there up at the top. Now what I want you to do is I want you to go on in the exercises, and I want you to do number 4, number 6, and number 7. Go ahead and take some time, work those out with a partner, and then pause the video so that you can come back and check all of your work. I will be expecting to see those same things that we just did in the example. So first you're going to figure out what power of 10 you have to multiply it so that you can come up with your algorithm. Go ahead and work out your algorithm. Make sure you have your P-chart and be ready to check your work. So go ahead and pause your video and get your partner. Okay, so let's go ahead and check your work for exercise 4. You should have set up first your fraction of 2,000 over 3 2/10 because there is one decimal behind, or one digit behind the decimal in your denominator. You should have multiplied by 10 each, the denominator and the numerator, giving you 20,000 over 32. When you divide that out, 20,000 divided by 32, you should have gotten 625. I will give you a moment to pause the video and check all of your work. If you got number 4 incorrect, I want you to go on and do number 5 on your own and then bring it for me to check. Let's go on to number 6. Again, the first thing you should have done was set up your fraction, 893 7600ths over 2100ths. Because there are 2 digits behind the decimal in your denominator, you multiply that by 100. And you should have gotten 89,376 over 21. So you divide 89,376 by 21, and you should have gotten 4,256. I'll give you a moment to pause the video so that you can check your work. Okay, let's go on to number 7. For number 7, you should have put 6 and 194 thousandths over 326 thousandths. Because in your denominator there are 3 digits behind the decimal, you should have multiplied by 1,000 both the numerator and denominator, which should have given you 6,194 divided by 326. And if you divide that out, you would get the quotient of 19. And again, I will give you time to pause the video to check your work for that. Okay, we're going to move on to the final step in today's lesson, which is example 3. And then we will be adding one thing to your notebook, just because I want you to make sure you have an example in your notebook. So we're going to take a look at example 3. And it says a plane travels at 3,625 and 26 hundredths miles in 6.9 hours. What is the plane's unit rate? Represent the situation with a fraction. So the very first thing I'm going to do is write my fraction. The next thing it says is it wants me to rewrite it using the same units. Because I know that I can put a 0 here anytime. If there's a decimal, you can add in a 0. You can add in a million zeros. It doesn't change the answer. It just allows you to read the number differently. So I would read this as 3,625 and 26 hundredths divided by 6 and 9 hundredths. Because remember, I can annex a 0 there. So it wants me to estimate. So I would say that 3,625 is close to 3,500, and that 6 and 90 hundredths is close to 7. And how many 7s are in 3,500? I would say there are 500. The next step, it wants us to express the divisor as a whole number. So now we go back to the practice that we have been doing in this lesson. So I'm going to rewrite my original problem. I'm going to leave that 0 off. And I can see here that there's one digit after the decimal. So I'm only going to multiply both by 10. Now, I realize that some of you are saying, but there's 2 digits in the numerator. That doesn't matter. What our goal is to get rid of that decimal completely in our denominator. So if I move this decimal, then this becomes 69. And when I move this decimal, it becomes 36,252 and 6/10. So now that is the problem that I would be solving. So 36,252.6 divided by 69. And again, you know, I'm going to have you start with that T-chart. And if you want to pause the video right here and work this out yourself, that's fine. Or you are welcome to just copy down the multiples that I have already calculated for you. And if you ever see me make a mistake in one of these videos with my calculations, you can just let me know sometime during the video so that I can make a correction for future reference for students that will use this in the future. So now I'm going to see how many 69s are in this number here. So if I look, just because there's 2 digits in my divisor, if I look at the 2 digits, the first one's in my dividend, I can see that they're smaller than my divisor, so that tells me I have to go over my 3rd digit. So I'm going to look for a number that's close to 362 without going over, and that number is 345, and its partner is 5. So I'm going to subtract 345 from 362. And that gives me 17. 17 is less than 69, so I know I should be correct. And I pull down my 5. Now I'm going to look for an answer over here that's close to 175 without going over. And I can see that that answer is 138 and its partner is 2. So I put a 2 over that 5. And I'm going to subtract 138 from 175. Bring down my 2. So now I'm going to look for an answer over here that's close to 372 without going over, and I can see I'm back to that trusty number 5 there, and it was 345. So now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look for 276 or something close, and I can see that 4 is 276. Now, you'll notice that I still have a decimal in my problem here. And as long as you've kept your numbers lined up, this shouldn't be an issue. You just move that decimal back up into your quotient in the exact same place. You are not moving it back and forth to the right or the left. You're simply pushing it straight to the top into your quotient. So your answer is 525 and 4/10. Now, if I wanted to check this to make sure I was correct, then I would multiply my quotient by my divisor, and that should give me my dividend. So I'm going to multiply 525.4 times 69. I'm going to punch that into my calculator. 525.4 times 69 equals 36252.6. So that tells me that my answer is correct. That's my check and see. Now, for today's assignment, I want you to do your problem set numbers 1, 2, 5, 6, and I'm going to go ahead and throw in 9 because it's a word problem, just because I want you to be able to pick those numbers out and go ahead and work through all the steps that we've practiced today. You can do your work on a separate sheet of paper. You can do it on the back of your exit ticket, whichever you prefer. Just make sure you get those practice problems turned in to me. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Now, if you will take out your notebook, we are going to put an example in our notebook. So if our problem is 3,581 and 9/10 divided by 4 and 9/10, I'm going to first write it as a fraction. I can see that there's one number, so I'm going to multiply both by 10. If I move my decimal over, that gives me 49 for my denominator. Move my decimal over, that gives me 35,819 as my numerator. So that sets up my problem. And when you are working these out in notebook, obviously it is a little bit easier to keep those numbers lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and write in all of those multiples. And then I'm just going to work out this long division problem in my notebook so that I have one. So again, if I look at these first two digits here, because there's 2 digits in my divisor, I can see they're smaller, so that tells me I have to go over 3 digits. So I'm going to look for a number that's close to 358 without going over, and I see that its partner is 7. And 7 times 49 is 343. I subtract. Bring down my 1. So I'm going to now look for a number that's close to 151 without going over. That's 147. Its partner is 3. And now how many 49s are in 49? Just 1. So my answer is 731. So that's it for today's lesson. Feel free again to let me know if you have any questions.